Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today we delve into another harrowing case, a tale of fractured lives, public deception, and elusive hopes. In the spring of 1999, the quiet community of Southport in the United Kingdom found itself deeply divided. Broadcast media and television airwaves were flooded with interviews featuring Mitchell Key. On the surface, Mitchell appeared utterly ordinary, yet he had somehow transformed into a local folk hero. His sudden rise to fame was sparked by a chilling scandal, the mysterious disappearance of his wife, Lindsay Wilson. One ordinary day, Lindsay vanished without a trace, abandoning her two young children. Her seemingly distraught husband portrayed the image of a heartbroken, abandoned man, publicly pleading for her return. Along the way, he aired intimate details of their marriage, frequently painting his missing spouse in an unflattering light. Mitchell claimed her sudden departure was fueled by a craving for an extravagant, reckless lifestyle. He even alleged seeing his former beloved cruising around town in a luxury vehicle, callously driving past her past life. In his eyes, the grief-stricken mother had simply abandoned her family for a wealthy lover. Yet, beneath the tragic persona broadcast to the world, Mitchell was secretly relishing his newfound bachelorhood. Consequently, the public split in two. One half felt immense sympathy for the lonely father, showering him with care and support, while the other half remained skeptical, suspecting him of a far more sinister crime. As Mitchell bathed in the spotlight, law enforcement relentlessly pursued the investigation. Investigators found his persona difficult to trust, and the case grew increasingly complex. According to Lindsay's closest friends and family, the couple's true dynamic contradicted everything her husband claimed on television. Those who knew Lindsay best remembered her as a devoted wife and a fiercely loving mother. They were convinced that something catastrophic had occurred. Otherwise, she would have found a way to reach her children long ago. Public suspicion reached a fever pitch during a famous talk show appearance. When the host directly asked Mitchell if he had taken his wife's life, he refused to give a straight answer, dismissing it as an indecent question. After a tense pause, he added a chilling remark, "Wait and find out." Was the supposedly model husband implying he possessed secret knowledge, or was he so arrogant in his defense that he was merely waiting for the truth to unfold? Answers to these unsettling questions were soon to follow. This shocking story vividly illustrates the devastating consequences of domestic Stockholm syndrome, a phenomenon where a traumatic bond forms between an abuser and a victim, leading the victim to empathize with, defend, and justify their tormentor. Once understood purely through the lens of high-stakes hostage situations, this dynamic is now widely recognized within abusive households. Typically, a victim with an empathetic, self-sacrificing mindset becomes drawn to a narcissistic partner, harboring a desire to heal and empower them. At its core, those who fall victim to such cruelty are often deeply kind-hearted people. Lindsay Wilson was precisely that, a young woman who simply wanted to love and be loved. Her primary mistake was failing to recognize the dangerous nature of her partner early on, leaving her trapped in a suffocating web of codependency. Lindsay's path was marked by early hardship. At just 17 years old, she discovered she was pregnant. Having been raised in a loving, large family, she had never imagined stepping into motherhood so young, leaving her emotionally unprepared for the stormy road ahead. Her world was further shattered when her boyfriend, with whom she had been since she was just 13, fled the moment he learned about the impending fatherhood. The sudden abandonment left Lindsay deeply upset and terrified. She knew all too well the heavy physical and financial demands of raising a child. Although the Wilson family was loving and close-knit, her parents had always worked tirelessly to overcome constant financial struggles just to provide for their children. Therefore, when Lindsay met Mitchell Key 5 months into her pregnancy, she viewed him as a true gift of fate. Mitchell, a 20-year-old, acted like the ultimate gentleman, attentive, deeply caring, and completely undeterred by her delicate condition. He assured her that he had fallen in love at first sight, promising to spend his life with her and raise the unborn child as his own. At the time, Mitchell was earning a solid living and even took on extra shifts, so his beloved would want for nothing. However, when the young couple announced their decision to marry, both sets of parents were stunned. They felt a 5-week-old relationship was far too young to withstand the pressures of such circumstances, leaving them unable to genuinely celebrate. The only positive note Lindsay's relatives observed was that her former cheerfulness and vibrant health had returned. Still, they found her new boyfriend overly sweet, even cloyingly polite. Ultimately, no one interfered with the marriage, keeping their growing doubts to themselves. The wedding took place in August 1995 within an intimate family circle. Most guests represented the bride's side, while the groom's entourage consisted of merely 5 people: his parents, a brother, and 2 friends. During the celebration, Lindsay was ecstatic, truly believing she had won the lottery in life. Yet, her family's uneasy premonitions only deepened when a sharp dispute erupted between the newlyweds by the end of the evening. The conflict unfolded right before everyone's eyes. Unprovoked by anything significant, Mitchell suddenly flew into a rage and began shouting loudly. During the argument, he grabbed his new wife by the hand and started violently shaking her, a display that looked both deeply unsettling and threatening. Though Lindsay tried to calm him down, the outburst cast a dark shadow over the event. Once his anger subsided, Mitchell apologized to the room and made light of the incident, dismissing it as simple holiday nerves. Lindsay quickly brushed the moment aside, but in reality, it was one of the first major red flags of a treacherous relationship. Years later, on February 5, 1999, a dedicated social worker officially reported Lindsay Key missing, expressing grave concern over being unable to reach her client. Lindsay had recently sought psychological support due to recurring domestic violence, bravely disclosing the terrifying reality of her home life. Following the report, the social worker began closely monitoring the young family. She informed the police that she had been unable to contact Lindsay for several weeks. Every time she visited the residence or called the phone, Mitchell answered. Despite the worker's repeated requests to speak directly to Lindsay, Mitchell offered only evasive excuses. Even though she left her contact details during every visit, Lindsay never called back. Sensing the situation was unsafe, the social worker requested an urgent welfare check. When law enforcement arrived at the address, they too were unable to locate Lindsay. Mitchell calmly explained that he had not seen his wife in a long time, but insisted she was not missing. According to his story, Lindsay had gone to a party with a friend on Christmas Eve and returned early the next morning, somewhat intoxicated. After a heated argument flared up between them, Lindsay simply walked out, packed her belongings and walked out, without even saying goodbye to her children. He insisted that she had abandoned the family for another man, desiring no further contact with any of them. The official search for Lindsay began immediately. During conversations with her family, officers learned that her relatives had last seen her in person on December 11th. That day, she had appeared in high spirits, looking well and acting completely normal, though her family had long grown accustomed to the quiet strain of her troubled marriage. Lindsay's mother also revealed that on December 24th, she had tried numerous times to call her daughter to arrange a visit to drop off Christmas presents for her grandchildren. Unable to reach Lindsay by phone, Mrs. Wilson decided to drop by the house in person that afternoon. Mitchell answered the door alongside the children, coldly informing his mother-in-law that his wife had gone out with friends and arrogantly accusing her of infidelity. Having long learned to take her son-in-law's bitter accusations with a grain of salt, Mrs. Wilson handed over the gifts and left. Detectives initially found it bizarre that no one had raised an alarm regarding the young mother's whereabouts for over 2 months. However, there was a tragic explanation for the delay. Everyone knew Mitchell tightly restricted his wife's contact with the outside world, even barring her from speaking with close relatives. The family was used to the extreme difficulty of reaching her, making it entirely plausible for Lindsay to fall off the radar temporarily. Still, that silence did not mean they were unconcerned. The sudden realization of her disappearance deeply terrified them. Everyone who knew Lindsay adamantly insisted that she did not drink, led a modest lifestyle, and was strictly forbidden by her husband from seeing friends or acquaintances. Every word Mitchell offered to the police directly contradicted his established character profile, instantly raising investigators' suspicions. It seemed wildly improbable that a man who exerted absolute control over his wife would simply let her walk away, or that Lindsay would willingly leave her cherished children in the hands of a tyrant. Nevertheless, the situation demanded a meticulous investigation. Police began interviewing all of Lindsay's acquaintances, searching for anyone who might have seen her after the December 11 family gathering. They questioned neighbors and requested surveillance footage from the residential complex where the couple lived, as well as the surrounding area. Regrettably, because so much time had elapsed before her disappearance was formally reported, all potential footage had already been deleted. Despite this setback, investigators uncovered another critical date, December 15th. On that day, Lindsay was spotted at the local post office, mailing several letters and postcards as usual. Her older sister also admitted that they had met on that exact date. Lindsay had paid her a brief visit, a risky move made despite Mitchell's explicit disapproval. The sisters enjoyed a cup of tea and a quick conversation, after which Lindsay walked her sister out. As they said goodbye, Lindsay secretly slipped a folded note into her sister's hand, urgently asking her to read it later. The sister placed the note inside her purse, but in the whirlwind of daily life, she completely forgot about it. Devastatingly, she was unable to locate the note later on, leaving its contents forever unknown. After that fateful day, no one ever saw Lindsay alive again. As the months dragged on, with no word from the missing mother, investigators clung to every scrap of information, increasingly convinced she was no longer alive. While they lacked the concrete evidence needed to formally charge Mitchell, the more they uncovered about the couple's history, the darker the picture became. Shortly after their wedding, Mitchell and Lindsay had moved away from their parents to rent an apartment in Southport, where Lindsay soon gave birth to their daughter, Robin. However, the joy of a newborn was constantly overshadowed by Mitchell's volatile temper. In their new home, the young wife bore the full brunt of her husband's unstable moods. He could be laughing and joking one moment, only to become dangerously unbalanced and aggressive the next. In a desperate attempt to maintain a fragile peace, Lindsay surrendered completely to his will without even realizing it. Mitchell began controlling her every move, exploding in rage whenever she missed a phone call. Yet these furious arguments were invariably followed by passionate reconciliations, where Mitchell would drop to his knees, beg for forgiveness, and profess his undying love. For a short while, peace would return, only to reset the agonizing cycle: conflict, reconciliation, repetition. Slowly, Lindsay was losing all recognition of the man she had once loved. Lindsay often confided in her relatives about the ordeal she was enduring. They repeatedly urged her to return home and end her suffering, but admitting her mistake was a bitter pill to swallow for the young woman. In a later interview, the Wilsons revealed that Lindsay was constantly living in the past. Every time her husband promised to change and assured her everything would be fine, she desperately wanted to believe him. As a devoted wife, she waited patiently for the gentle, caring man she once fell in love with to return. Meanwhile, Mitchell only tightened his suffocating grip. He forbade her from going out alone in the evenings, eventually restricting her from going anywhere without him present. He was consumed by jealousy over her every move, yet he harbored no such standards for himself, frequently being spotted in dubious affairs. Lindsay once confessed to her older sister that she suspected Mitchell of infidelity, recalling a surreal moment when a strange woman showed up at their doorstep looking for him, utterly stunned to discover he was married. That incident ignited a furious argument that quickly escalated into physical violence. From that point forward, physical abuse became a routine part of their lives. To prevent his wife from complaining and tarnishing his reputation, Mitchell systematically severed her ties to the outside world, starting with neighbors, friends, and acquaintances, and eventually targeting her family. Despite her profound unhappiness, Lindsay secretly tried to maintain contact with her loved ones, living in constant terror of being discovered and punished. Yet, alongside her lingering feelings, the comfortable lifestyle Mitchell provided kept her tethered to him. He earned a good living, fully supporting her and their child while covering all the bills, ensuring she lacked nothing financially. This era of living in a gilded cage came to an abrupt end when Lindsay discovered she was pregnant again. Certain that she did not want another child under these conditions, she faced a harsh reality. To his credit, Mitchell had always been good to his stepdaughter, even loving her as his own, but Lindsay recognized that their home was no place to bring another baby into the world. She decided to terminate the pregnancy. When Mitchell learned of her decision, he exploded in a rage, hurling bitter insults and physically intimidating her. That very evening, Lindsay packed her belongings, took her daughter, and fled to her parents' house. Her family breathed an immense sigh of relief as Lindsay proceeded with the medical procedure as planned. Over time, however, she began to deeply miss her husband. Mitchell refused to let her go, relentlessly calling and begging her to return, while trying every trick in the book to prove he had changed. Eventually, he broke down her resolve and convinced her to give him another chance. Initially, the reconciliation was a success. Their old affection seemed to reignite, and the couple was soon expecting another child. This fragile peace lasted for 6 months, until Mitchell suffered a horrifying anger outburst. Fortunately, he did not direct his violent rage at his pregnant wife, but he completely decimated their apartment instead. He smashed everything in sight, destroyed furniture, ripped doors off their hinges, and left the walls stained with blood and food scraps. He even hurled the television through the window and vandalized the car parked outside. The outraged landlord demanded full compensation for the repairs and ordered them to vacate immediately. The catastrophic event crippled the family's finances, forcing them to take out a massive loan and move into a far more modest apartment. In October 1997, their son Jack was born, and Mitchell adored the little boy. Yet, the toxic dynamic between the spouses grew increasingly strained. Throughout their marriage, Mitchell would abruptly walk out, disappearing for days or even a week at a time over trivial or entirely fabricated excuses. Lindsay had grown accustomed to his erratic departures, but every time he abandoned her, the wounds cut just as deep. She filed for divorce and returned to her parents' home. Apparently realizing she could no longer navigate the separation on her own, she reached out to a local charity that assists women in crisis. They helped her secure subsidized housing in a different city. Terrified that Mitchell would discover her new address or phone number, Lindsay took strict measures to distance herself from him. After he issued several menacing threats, she even obtained a restraining order from law enforcement. With the guidance of a therapist, she began the painstaking process of rebuilding her life. She started a journal to document her daily experiences, intending to pass it down to her children so they would never repeat her mistakes. The entries strongly validated her relatives' claims regarding the toxic dynamics within her marriage. Yet, despite all her precautions, Mitchell eventually uncovered her phone number and began calling incessantly, demanding to see his son. Bathed in her newfound freedom, Lindsay felt profoundly lonely and soon found herself unable to resist his relentless persistence. They resumed communicating, began seeing each other again, and eventually moved back in together. Ashamed to admit her own weakness, the mother of two kept the reconciliation a secret. Nevertheless, the truth inevitably came to light. Her family and friends were shocked and deeply disappointed by her decision to reunite with the tyrant, unable to comprehend why she had welcomed him back into her life. Mitchell remained intensely disliked by Lindsay's relatives, who wanted nothing to do with him, causing communication between them to nearly cease. Despite everyone's best efforts, Lindsay had repeatedly willingly walked back into the abusive relationship. Realizing their interventions were futile, her support network accepted the tragic reality and stepped back. This time, however, her decision proved fatal. At the onset of the investigation into Lindsay's disappearance, Mitchell was initially cooperative with search efforts. However, as the case gained widespread media attention, his focus shifted dramatically. He transformed his personal misfortune into a public spectacle, quickly evolving into a prominent media figure. As Mitchell invited more journalists into his home, his constant media appearances felt increasingly insincere, with viewers frequently noticing a smug smirk on his face. Lindsay's parents were convinced their son-in-law was involved in their daughter's disappearance, and detectives similarly viewed him as the prime suspect. Yet, without direct evidence, their hands were tied. Comprehensive searches were conducted at the couple's home and throughout the surrounding area. Following a provocative question during a televised interview, the arrogant antagonist grew even more brazenly declaring that the time would come when his wife's family would be forced to apologize for their suspicions. On the eve of the holiday season, Mitchell sent a mocking postcard to the lead investigator. Taped to it was a box of hair dye. Instead of a festive greeting, Mitchell tauntingly wrote, "I hope this covers your gray and gives you a bit more confidence." He openly mocked the detective while displaying his supreme arrogance. In the press, he actively played the victim, not only of marital infidelity, but also of ruthless treatment by law enforcement. To put the insufferable upstart in his place, the investigative team gave an interview. Without revealing key details, they subtly hinted that the famous family man was far from the person he claimed to be. In February 2000, Mitchell Key found himself engulfed in a fresh scandal. It was exposed that he had been forging his missing wife's signature to fraudulently collect social benefits, offering yet another piece of indirect evidence tying him to her disappearance and presumed demise. Investigators hoped to capitalize on this financial motive, but the suspect's public popularity surprisingly worked in his favor. A wave of vocal supporters emerged, passionately arguing that as a struggling single father, he was merely doing what he had to do to survive. He had every right to financial assistance. These sympathetic public sentiments severely hindered the detectives' ability to bring the murder charges they so desperately sought. Nevertheless, authorities managed to formally charge him with fraud. Mitchell Key was brought to court for the benefit scam and was promptly found guilty, sentenced to 100 hours of community service. This time, Mitchell could not walk away completely unscathed. The deliberate forgery of his missing wife's signature appeared beyond suspicious to the public eye, causing a massive wave of angry backlash. Eventually, Mitchell's composure snapped, and he began fiercely lashing out, blaming the media for intruding into his private life. The harrowing case of Lindsay Key's disappearance might have remained forever unsolved had it not been for a horrific clue discovered entirely by chance. On June 1, 2000, a park-goer noticed his dog acting strangely near a roller coaster at a city amusement park. Digging into the earth, the animal uncovered human remains. Emergency specialists were immediately called to the scene, and the remains were sent for forensic examination, which revealed parts of a female torso. Subsequent genetic testing confirmed the devastating truth. The remains belonged to Lindsay Key, who had been missing for over a year and a half. This grim breakthrough instantly revitalized the investigation, making it undeniably clear that Lindsay had fallen victim to a monstrous crime. The primary objective now was to bring her killer to justice. On June 7th, Mitchell was brought in for interrogation. Detectives were relentless, and after more than 36 hours of intense, intermittent questioning, the suspect finally broke down under the immense pressure and confessed to the horror. On December 15, 1998, immediately after meeting with her sister, Lindsay had informed her husband that she was leaving him and filing for divorce. This time, her determination was absolute. According to Mitchell, the news infuriated him, driving him into a violent rage where he viciously strangled her to death, a horrific act committed right in front of their innocent young children. He then concealed her lifeless body inside their bedroom, stuffing towels in the gap under the door to mask any decaying odors. Realizing he could not dispose of the evidence alone, Mitchell enlisted the help of his brother, Elliot, a skilled butcher who possessed the tools and knowledge he required. Though Elliot was initially hesitant, Mitchell eventually persuaded him to become an accomplice. While the children played unaware in the adjacent room, the brothers methodically dismembered Lindsay's body and later scattered her remains across various locations throughout the city. During his cold confession, the murderer expressed neither remorse nor empathy. Instead, he displayed a chilling pride in his actions, arrogantly boasting that without his confession, police would have never proven his guilt. The following day, he led investigators to the other hidden sites where her limbs were buried. Sadly, her head and one hand were never recovered. The trial of the Key brothers took place in January 2001. The court proceedings were swift and decisive. Mitchell Key was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison, with parole eligibility set after 17 years. A court-appointed psychiatrist noted that the defendant exhibited every classic trait of a narcissist with severe sadistic tendencies. His brother, Elliot, received a 7-year sentence for his horrific role in concealing the crime. Following the trial, Lindsay's children were taken in by her grieving parents, who officially gave the kids their own surname to distance them from their father's legacy. Tragically, just 3 months after the sentencing, another devastating blow struck the Wilson family. Overwhelmed by profound shock and grief, one of Lindsay's older brothers took his own life in the attic of their family home. In his heartbreaking farewell note, he wrote that he saw no purpose in living in such a cruel world and wished to reunite with his cherished sister. Since 2017, Mitchell Key has been eligible to apply for parole. However, his petitions have been repeatedly denied. The Wilson family, including Lindsay's grown children, live in constant fear that the murderer might one day walk free. Consequently, they launched a passionate petition urging authorities to keep him incarcerated indefinitely. As long as the powerful voices of the victim's family are heard, the killer will remain behind bars. Yet, no legal punishment can ever bring Lindsay back. In an interview, Mr. Wilson shared that he had heard rumors of his former son-in-law attempting suicide in prison, candidly adding that he sincerely hopes the murderer succeeds next time. Psychological studies reveal that many individuals suffering from domestic Stockholm syndrome repeatedly try to adapt to their abusers, often acting against their own best interests even when loved ones intervene. In such toxic dynamics, only deep self-reflection and professional therapy can truly break the cycle. Without realizing the danger, the outcome is almost always catastrophic. Thank you all for watching. Please subscribe to the channel. There are many more profound, gripping stories ahead.